Fire Radio.
Hey guys, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast tonight. Somebody I'm looking forward to getting to know. We've sent some messages back and forth on Instagram where I spend a lot of time. He's got a couple different pages there. Let's go this route. 34 years, retired out of Montgomery County, Maryland Fire Rescue down there. As a battalion chief, he's now the assistant chief of volunteer services for the Frederick County, Maryland Fire Department. David Polikoff, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Been following you for quite a while.
That's cool. I always enjoy that. And it's like, oh, I know who you are. Yeah, I'd love to talk. I'm like, so when I sent you a message, you were like, yeah, let's chat, man. And I was like, this is what I want. Like, I think conversation is so important, and I think it's so underrated. And I think so many people shy away from it. But I feel like guys like you and I, we enjoy conversation, especially conversations that get people talking. It's important.
Yeah, it's one of those, stay off of this. And do some face-to-face talking. My wife brought up something the other day. She goes, you notice how kids don't talk on the phone anymore?
Yeah.
And I was like, you're right. It's always messages and TikToks and reels and instant messages. So I like the face-to-face.
My kids live on Snapchat. Like that's how they communicate with their friends, on Snap. And it's like, they don't even text. I can text my kids and I'll get an answer back right away. And I go, hey, like I finally get a hold of, you didn't answer my text. Like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't really look at my text messages. Like, right? They don't answer text messages. It's crazy. Right. But they go through Snapchat. I'll even watch my kids go to a friend's house and they don't even ring the doorbell anymore. They'll text when we pull in the driveway that they're there and their friend meets them at the door and they open the door for them. They don't even go up and knock on the door or ring the doorbell anymore.
Well, that's why two old dogs like you and I had to kind of figure out how do we reach the younger generation? Well, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok. So,
well, that is a very good point. I guess it brings us to the conversation tonight. There's a couple things, right? So, on top of your career in the fire service, you also have a longstanding career and you're a life member of the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department out of PG County. Sykesville, I believe you said, is your home volunteer department. Yep. Being the assistant chief of volunteer services. I mean, these are aspects in your career that make you lean back on your traditional foundation of the volunteer fire service where you are today in your career service.
Yeah, I started as a volunteer when I was 12 years old, as a junior member in Prince George's County. My stepdad, who was actually on my podcast this month, we talked all about that. He started as a junior member at the Greenbelt Fire Department. That's where I started as a junior member because they took you at 12. So been involved in the fire department since I was 12. But my mom was in the auxiliary, and like I said, my stepdad was in the fire department. So I'm third generation between my grandfather, my stepdad, myself. So it's the family business. It's in the blood.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, that influence early on then from 12, 12 is pretty early. So PG had a program for that young of an age group back then.
Yep. We they didn't have dry erase boards. So it was all like the push letters on the blackboard. And basically we'd have to be there on the weekends. And we had chores that we had to do. Believe it or not, we went down there, we vacuumed, we mopped the floor, we cleaned the bathrooms, washed the windows on the fire engine. If it was a good day and the fire engines were dirty, we actually got to wash the fire engines. So, I mean, we look forward to getting to the firehouse to do these chores over the Saturday and the Sunday. We'd ride our bikes, me and like 4 other kids that were junior members. We'd ride our bikes to the firehouse and we'd be there all day. I'm sure we were a pain in the ass to the older members, but we were doing what they wanted us to do.
Yeah, but think about what that did for you, right? I mean, talk about a foundation, a really strong starting point. Taking pride in the equipment, ownership of the equipment, ownership of the building, the way you presented yourself, the way you presented your company. That's huge. And for a 12-year-old to be able to have those, I don't know, those parts of life instilled in them at such an early age, especially by a group of men that, like, I knew growing up, like the firemen in the firehouse that I grew up in, I looked at them like they were giants.
Absolutely. A lot of them, and believe it or not, you look back at them, a lot of them were, in their 20s,
Yeah,
they were young, right. But I mean, I'm looking at them like these are like grizzled adults, where my dad is a Vietnam veteran and my grandfather's a World War II veteran. And of course they had those sprinkled in there along with the career guys that were assigned to that department. Some of them were Vietnam vets, but you're right. Being 12 years old and looking up at these 22-year-olds, just like these guys are gods. They're
Yeah.
going out when the bells go off, they get to go on the fire engines.
There was, I mean, that I can still remember the image of these guys, the way the horse play in the firehouse, how they joked around. And then as soon as it was time to go to work, they would, I mean, everything stopped, their demeanor changed. And it was like they were giants. And as a little kid looking up at these guys, man, I still think of it today. And I hope that I present myself the same way maybe to my kids when they were growing up, but I just don't think I did. I think these guys, I have this, I put them on a pillar, on a podium in front of me, and I just look at them like they were the reason why I wanted to be better.
Absolutely. And why I wanted to, advance once you got to the age of 16, you were allowed to be what they call it a senior member. Once I turned 16, we were living in Montgomery County at that time. I left Greenbelt to join Burtonsville, which was my hometown fire
Sure.
department as a 16-year-old. I was the high school cadet. That's all I wanted to do was be a high school cadet because I'd go to school 4 periods a day instead of 7. And 3 days a week I'd be at the firehouse. The other 2 I'd be at the training academy. What more could you ask
Doesn't
for?
get much better than that, right?
I'm getting credits to go to the firehouse. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a program too, like Burtonsville. I've been there. I mean, that is a busy house, right? There's a lot of work being had, and just a great place to, grow up and learn the job.
Yeah, when I started there, we were at the old firehouse, which is down in Old Columbia Pike. And back then, we were running less than 1,000 calls between the ambulance, the rescue squad, and the engine. We didn't have a truck back then, so we were running less than 1,000 calls. I remember when we broke 1,000 calls, we had a party.
Yeah, right.
And now those guys are running like 6, 7,000 calls a year.
It's crazy how much they're going out the door down there for sure.
Mhm.
So what did that look like for you then? I mean, having a foundation, a strong foundation, a third generation. I mean, your ways were kind of, I guess, planned for you. I mean, they were pre-planned long before you had a say as to what you wanted to do then. So getting into the career fireside, what did that look like? I mean, how old were you when you got hired?
Well, I got hired when I was 18, so I was very fortunate. I knew what I wanted to do when I
That's
was in seventh
wild.
grade. I knew once I became a junior member, I knew I wanted to be a career firefighter. Um, so it was everything I was doing was working towards that.
Yes.
So when I became a high school cadet, in 11th grade, so the whole year of 11th grade, we did Fire One and Fire Two. And then in 12th grade, we did EMT. So we were Maryland State EMTs by the time we got finished with that program. So when I came out, I already had the foundation. I had taken some classes along the way as a volunteer. By the time I got hired, I graduated high school. I had a late birthday, so I graduated when I was 17. So it took me almost a year to get hired, and which is very fortunate, especially at the age of 18. I mean, what more can you ask for? So we were hired back then. We weren't a county department. It was still individual corporations hired their
Oh, okay.
employees. So I
Wow.
got hired at the Silver Spring Fire Department. And to me, that was the big city. Silver Spring is right on the DC line, right on Upper Northwest, and part of Upper Northeast. So to me, that was like the big city coming from Burtonsville, which is, cow country, to, high rise fires and things like that. So yeah, I was like a kid in a candy store. But when I got hired, I mean, best day of my life, one of the best days of my life. Um, it was unbelievable. And
Steve,
that
20,
you walk
20.
into that fire. What's that?
No, I was just going to say 25. When you're 25 years old, you're a kid. I can't even imagine 18 years old being
I
hired. It's
know.
wild.
I know. I was a little hyper. I was a little hyperactive. But I know when I got there, I was pure entertainment for those guys.
Yeah.
And probably some of the best firemen I'll ever work with. Took me under their wing and just showed me the way, and I was accepted right away as because they knew all I wanted to do was go to work. I just wanted to
Sure.
go do jobs. You know, they accepted me, and like I said, I provided a lot of entertainment for them because I was 18-year-old kid with I think the next guy close to my age was 11 years older than me.
Right.
So
Right.
everybody else was
Which
a
only
little
put him at 29. I mean, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. I love it. I mean, what a great start, though. But it kind of just makes sense, right? Like who you are, getting to know you through this conversation. It kind of makes sense. I mean,
like I said, I knew what I wanted to do when I was,
Yes.
in seventh grade,
Yes.
and got hired, and I never looked back. And
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time at each rank, Never thought about having, I got to promote fast. I got to promote fast. And, we see these traps of people promoting too fast, and not able to handle that particular position. And then they try to move on to the next spot. I spent a lot of time in each position as a firefighter. I spent like 7 years as a firefighter before I became a master, which is basically like a technician.
Right.
And I did probably 5 or 6 years as a technician before I became a lieutenant. And I think I spent 5 years as a lieutenant. You only had to do two and you could get promoted into each rank. So I spent like 5 as a lieutenant and got promoted to captain. I did 9 years as a captain. I had no desire to be a chief,
Mm.
but it was on a whim. My captain, when I was a lieutenant, said, "Hey, go to the National Fire Academy and take a couple of classes." One of was managing alarms. You're learning about the NIMS system and stuff like that. This was right after 9/11.
Right.
And so I learned about NIMS, and in Montgomery, we were already training our officers to take that tactical command, that initial command. Um, so we were already running house fires, building fires, things like that until that command officer got on the scene. So we were able to effectively, while we were engaged in firefighting activities, to manage one or two other companies because that's how we were trained. When I went to the National Fire Academy to take that class, and I took managing multiple alarms with people from all over the country,
Mm.
and these people were struggling. And these were deputy chiefs and assistant chiefs. And at that time, I was a captain managing a house fire. And I was thinking to I was telling my wife, I'm not trying to sound arrogant. I said, but if this is what we have to offer as command officers, I said, this is pretty scary. We kill over 100, we get, what, 120 firefighters a year. And these are the incident commanders, and they're struggling with house fires. And these are things that we do all the time. So after, kind of running that past my wife 4 or 5 times, it was basically, shit or get off the pot. Either
Mm.
take the battalion chief's test or shut the F up. And
I think that speaks though to I still think we have a lot of that today. How much our system, our fire service varies across the country by zip code to zip code. How
mhm.
very different it is. You guys in Montgomery County at the time were ahead of the curve, right? You were applying theory and practical experience and knowledge into your fire ground that other departments weren't doing. And being ahead of the curve, I think, sets you up because when you're in a department, when you're raised in a department or a company that gives you all those tools and is progressive and forward thinking, it makes you better, even when you take it for granted. Like a lot of times things are good or the way we do it, we take for granted that that's what we know. And as soon as we step out of the comfort of where we come from, we realize, whoa, it's different out here. It can be very different. I still think in 2023, there is a major a major I don't know difference. It varies across the country as to how we deliver our product to our customers. No.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny you make mention of how we take things for granted. I'll be
Yeah.
the first to admit, in the Mid Atlantic area, we're very resource rich.
Sure.
We have lots of when we get a box alarm in Montgomery County, you're getting 5 engine companies, 2 trucks, a rescue squad, an EMS unit, and 2 battalion chiefs right on the get go. So
With
you're bringing
staffing.
yeah,
With
you're bringing like
staffing.
30 people to the fire ground
Right.
right
Right. Right.
away. So I recognize that. And I would tell my guys when they start, kind of pooping on the system and talking about, this place is this and this place is that. I said, you need to go to the National Fire Academy and you need to sit in with people from across the country and take a class. And you'll humble yourself right away to know how much you actually have, how far ahead of the curve we are because of the area that we're in. We've got Washington, D.C. Fire Department, Prince George's Fire Department, Montgomery Fire Department, Fairfax, all of the Nova area. We're all on that same kind of hub of learning. So we're resource rich.
Yes.
And don't ever take that for granted because there's people out there that would love to have our problems. Um, so it was once you kind of recognize that, then you can start to apply what you learn for the organization that you work in, and understand that we do have it pretty nice. We do have it
Yeah.
rather well.
I was just having this conversation over the weekend about like insular departments and where, years ago, so many guys they only knew what they knew in their own department. They didn't need to or have the ability to get out and see how other things were being done. And when you become insular like that, you might become very, very good at what you do and where you ride. but there is more to it. And there can be opportunities out there that if you're now willing to go find and seek it, which it's more prevalent than ever. I mean, all you have to do literally is go on YouTube and you can have the ability to see how it's done elsewhere and you could judge for yourselves, but at least it's another influence. It's giving yourself an opportunity to open up the, open the book, open the cover, if you will, and see what else is out there. Other opportunities. You might find something that works better for you. You might find an answer to a problem that you guys have had for 25 years. You haven't really come to a great way to do it yet. And all of a sudden you see it one day and go, whoa, there it is. You know, I think we're in a good place today. I really do. I think there's a lot of opportunity, more opportunity today than ever before. Would you agree?
Absolutely. There's so much at our fingertips now that of learning classes, the training that's out there, the caliber of people that are out there learning more of the craft, and then bringing that information back and being able to apply it, or to see it and maybe apply it to your organization. It all goes back to, what might work for your organization might not work for mine, but parts of what you're doing,
Yeah.
I could work for that in my organization. And
Yes.
that's how the fire service is. We don't own, incident command. We don't own, cross lays and Minuteman packs. That was passed down from generation to generation. But then we have different variations of things that work well for where you work, or where you volunteer. So there's so many things out there, so many resources, so many avenues for us to get information, share information, which is important, to make the fire service better. So yeah, we've definitely come a long way just since the 90s. We've come quite a long way.
Well, and I'm glad you kind of segued that way, because that was going to be one of my next questions for you is 34 years, you retire, and now you're still going because you're a young guy, hired at 18. I mean, you got a lifetime ahead of you still, and you already have a lifetime in the fire service, which is just exciting, right? Because you're built on old school mentality, old school traditions, the guys that raised you, your mentors back when you were that impressionable at that young age. I mean, those guys gave you a solid foundation to lean back on. But now, fast forward all these years later, you're still a young guy and you're still very much in tune with today's way. And so you're taking old school values, old school mentality, but, and then mixing it up with today's delivery. That's pretty exciting. I think that's what really gives us dynamic leaders in the fire service today.
Yeah, I preach, aggressive firefighting, and I make sure that people understand that aggressive doesn't mean reckless. Aggressive means that you're hard hitting and you're doing the job precisely. That's what aggressive firefighting is, and it's even in my signature at Frederick now. Is we are an aggressive interior firefighting organization. It's what we do, and people out there is like, well, aggressive, that's just reckless. Well, no, then you obviously don't know the difference, because if you approach a fire overly cautious, that's when you're going to get hurt, or you're going to fail to do your job.
Yes.
So you have to be aggressive in this job. And that's where, you learn these new tactics by networking with people, by seeing what other people do. But, we're fortunate enough that we get to travel all over the country and teach, and we get to see how other people do things. We get things from small rural departments that may run a couple hundred calls a year, but the way that they're doing it, I'm like, man, we could adopt that
Yeah.
where we are,
Yeah.
and we could use that. And we tell people, we joke when we teach, we say, hey, if you have something, by all means, throw your hand up and tell us. If it's a great idea, we'll use it. We won't give you credit for it, but we're going to use it. But
I love it. Yeah,
th-
absolutely.
you have to be that you have to have an aggressive edge in firefighting, especially the way buildings are built now. Obviously, we talk about interior components and how they burn faster. So your lines have to be lighter, your nozzles have to be better, your fire engines have to be better, your gear has to be better, your firefighters have to be better, and in order to continue to do the job. It's not like it was, back in, I wasn't fighting fire in the 70s, but I know the components were a lot different than what they are now, and how these buildings are burning.
It's fun to watch. I mean, when you look at the fire service, I mean, I've been in it less than, about 29 years. I think this year would be my 29th year in the fire service. And for me, it's fast forwarded like crazy. And I think that the advancement today, you look at where we are today with electric, battery powered, right? And it went from like, battery powered fans to extrication equipment to forcible entry saws, roof saws, right? Like the forward progression. We went for, I remember when I came into fire service in 95, you're probably right around there sometime, I would think, right? With your start. What year did you start?
87
Oh, shit. Man.
as a career guy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you listen, I thought you were younger, man. See, look at that. But I remember thermal imaging, right? Like that was new. But if you think about how fast the advancement has been in the fire service, I think we're advancing quicker and faster than we ever have before, equipment wise, training wise, education wise. But we have to keep up with what's happening around us. I mean, it's good that we are advancing, society's advancing as well. Our generations that are coming in are a little bit different. They're cut a little bit different, but the equipment is starting to represent that newer generation and how they understand function and work. It's just an interesting time. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit in the fire service about how we are advancing and how we are moving forward. And I think now today more than ever, we're willing to try different advancements to help us in our mission. No.
No, you're right. And looking, I'm thinking as you're talking about how
Yeah.
the innovations, all the battery stuff, look in my ladder truck in my volunteer, my tower in my volunteer department, you cannot find one incandescent light bulb on that fire truck.
That's a good
Everything's
point.
everything is LED,
Good point.
from the tripod lights to the
Yeah.
Pelican lights. Everything's battery powered. Everything's LED. We have one electric smoke ejector. Everything else is a blowhard, battery powered blowhard fan. Um, so that's how everything has evolved. We still have gas powered saws. You're not going to replace a gas powered saw unless you get something that's equally as strong up on a roof that's battery powered. But we do have battery powered saws, cutoff saws, and things like that for some of the smaller jobs. We just got into the hydraulic Hearst tools for our rescue squad. We have hydraulic, and then we also have the battery powered stuff.
Right.
So things change. Even looking at our hose lines, when I first started, we were using, the variable gallonage 50 to 350
Right.
task force tip nozzles
That's
that
right.
if you were lucky, you got 80 gallons a minute out of because you never
Yeah,
cleaned the
exactly.
nozzles out, to fixed
Exactly.
gallonage nozzles. And the hose that we're using now, we went from cotton hose to, when I started, cotton hose, to the synthetic, to, when I left Montgomery County, we went back to 1.5-inch cross lays, and people thought we were crazy. But we actually went out, did the research, did the math, hooked up with Mercedes. We were going to go with 1.75-inch hose. We said, let's just test the 1.5 inch so we can say we did it. That way, nobody can say we didn't try. And I had a good team that pulled all that hose together. They put 200 feet of 1.5 inch in service, and they ran the numbers. And they called me up and said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "But we're getting 150 gallons a minute out of this 1.5 inch, and the fire engine's only pumping at 140." And I'm like, "Run your numbers again." We ran them 6 times.
Yeah.
Brought them to the ops chief, brought them to the fire chief, and the ops chief eventually said, "Hey, let's go back to 1.5 inch." And that's been about 4 years now. I've been retired for 2, or it's probably been 4 or 5 years, and I've been retired for 2. And I haven't heard anybody say like that 1.5 inch is garbage. They love it. Now I
Wow.
got people calling me, "Hey man, how did you get the 1.5 inch hose?" I said, "I'll send you our research."
Yeah. That's pretty. I'd be interested in seeing that too, Chief. If you do have it, I'd love for you to share that with me. I'd be very interested in seeing the research and the numbers on that. That's pretty interesting to me, for
Yep,
sure.
it was good stuff. It was, like I said, I don't work for Mercedes. They were just the hose that ended up delivering what we wanted, and
Yeah, I get
I
it.
think
I get it.
those guys are hitting it pretty hard now. So
Well, and I think the thing is too, though, is you brought up a good point. Is you did your homework, right? I think departments need to put the time in. They need to put their own research in. You can go off of whatever Dave Polikoff tells you, that they did or tried, but until you put your own hose in the street and you see what works for you, and that's a big part of it. That's doing your work, putting the work in, doing your work. That's important.
I'll be the first to admit that was probably the scariest thing I've done in my career, was putting my name on that 1.5 inch hose, going from 1.75 inch back to 1.5 inch. Thinking, everything running. What if it doesn't work? What if you're not getting the gallons per minute? What if our math was off, even though we did it 8 times? What if somebody gets burned? So that was probably the scariest thing that I've done in my entire career, was, put my stamp of approval on the inch and a half, but ultimately the ops chief had the final say, and he believed in our numbers and what we bought to him, and he rubber stamped it. And the fire chief said, "Okay."
That's cool. That's cool. Changing the culture for sure. Talk to me about your career in the fire service. I mean, position wise, you said 9 years as a captain. What, 5 years as a lieutenant? Is that what you said?
Yep, I did 7 years as a firefighter. So I did 7 years in Silver Spring, downtown Silver Spring, Station One, or we call it One Engine. We And then I got promoted out of there as a master, which is basically a technician, like a driver.
Right.
Like second officer. If the lieutenant was off, then the master would step up and ride the seat. And then from there, I got sent out to Germantown. So Germantown was the northern end of Montgomery County. So it's kind of rural out there at the time. It's not anywhere near what it was. And I did that for about a year, and then transferred to Glenmont, which is in Wheaton, downtown
Right.
Glenmont, right there at Randolph in Georgia. And that was an awesome assignment. I had a lot of young volunteers at Glenmont Station, Station 18. And those guys wanted nothing more. And there's Kensington had 4 stations. So nobody liked Station 18, which is how I liked it. Nobody liked the guys there because they were aggressive and they beat everybody in their first 2 area, and all they wanted to do was catch fire. So I had a blast there. I was there for a year. I was on the dive team, underwater rescue team for Montgomery County. So they moved all the water assets, the dive team assets, back to Germantown. They upped the staffing, so they said, "Hey, we're going to transfer you back to Germantown as a master." I'm like, "All right." So by the time I was on the lieutenant's list, so I did about a year back at Germantown with a great bunch of guys, great officers, great masters, firefighters, and did that for about a year, and then got promoted to lieutenant. Went to downtown Bethesda, which is basically like Silver Spring, except a lot more money there. So that's right on the Wisconsin Avenue corridor on the upper northwest part of DC. So a lot of money, a lot of old stuff, a lot of high rises. So I got every assignment I was assigned to. I learned a lot of stuff. Learned a lot about alarm systems and elevators in Bethesda. A lot of old construction in the Chevy Chase and Bethesda area, and so got to learn a lot. Ran a lot of calls, not a lot of fire, but a lot of calls. And then I did that for about 5 years, and then got promoted to captain. And I went to Glen Echo, which is like it's one of the most southern stations in Montgomery County, but in probably one of the highest dollar areas next to Potomac. And so we didn't run a lot of calls there, but I made the best of it. I got to exercise a lot of administrative skills, as we had some bumps that we had to iron out, but ended up with a pretty phenomenal shift that just wanted to do stuff.
Cool.
And we were out doing stuff all the time. Got to sleep all night,
Yeah.
so that's a bonus.
When did it become a countywide system, right? Because you said when you first got hired, you got hired by the Incorporated Fire Company, right? So
Yeah, I got hired in 87. They went county in 88. So
88.
a little less than a year on the job. We all reapplied for the job as county employees. And in 1988, we went to a county system.
But in the county system is still today a career and volunteer system, correct?
Yep. Montgomery County, I'll go out on a limb and say it's probably the largest combination system in the country.
Okay.
Yeah, it's usually a tie between us and PG County.
Okay.
We border each other.
Yeah. Well, I know this. I mean, being a buff for all these years of who I am and so on, every single company you mentioned, I recognize the name, right? I mean, there's just this way about that mid-Atlantic area that I know of coming from the Northeast, that it's a very heavily rooted like volunteer systems that have evolved into combination programs just out of the necessity for having available people. I mean, the call volume has gone through the roof, and the responsibilities have grown over the years. And so, but being a student of all that, I'm watching like every single one of those assignments you mentioned, I recognize the names of those companies. Those are very busy, active companies these days for sure, right?
Except Glen Echo. We weren't so busy there, but
okay.
But like I said, I learned there, and
Yeah.
I did 2.5 years at Glen Echo, and then I transferred to Rockville Station 3,
Yeah.
which is downtown Rockville, and had a blast. That's where I met RJ.
Mhm.
RJ runs Capital Fire. I think you had him on your show not too long ago.
Yep.
So it's a funny story is that I was RJ's Fire One instructor when he came in as an 18-year-old kid. But and it was one of those, he volunteered at Rockville, and then I was the captain at Rockville, and we hit it off. And so one day he comes to me and he says, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a training group. You want to be in on it?" I'm like, "Sure." That's how Capital Fire Trust started. So,
Yeah.
but so I did 3 years at Station 3, and then I went to the one of Rockville's other stations, Station 23, which is in Twinbrook, and I was there for about 4 years. Another busy station. As a captain, I got promoted to battalion chief, and when I got promoted, I was what they called the relief chief. So I worked Tuesday, Friday, 24 hours on Tuesday, 24 hours on Friday, and I worked on those guys' Kelly days when they were
Right.
off. So I worked in the 1st Battalion and the 4th Battalion. So I swung between the two. So the 1st Battalion is Silver Spring, Burtonsville, Hillendale, Tacoma Park, all on the eastern side of Montgomery County. And then Battalion 4 was Glenmont, Kensington, Wheaton, Sandy Springs. So one of the busier battalions in the
Nice.
county.
Yeah.
I did that for 8 years, man. I loved every second of it. Everybody's like, "When are you going to get your own shift?" I'm like, "I do have my own shift. I have your shift. I have your shift. I have your shift."
That's
You know,
cool. Yeah.
but and then I finally I ended up taking a spot in the 1st Battalion as the 1st Battalion chief on C shift, and I did that for a little over a year before I retired. But the cool thing was is that born in the 1st Battalion, volunteered in the 1st Battalion, got hired in the 1st Battalion, and I retired in the 1st
Retired.
Battalion.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, throughout this incredible career, position wise, what did you enjoy the most? Do you have a stint that stands out as your most memorable time or memorable position? Being a captain, a battalion, backstep fireman? Like, what about? I know they all have their ups and downs for sure, but there's got to be one that stands out.
They I'm not going to try and cop out. Every spot that I had, whether I wanted to be there or not, I learned something from
Sure.
it, whether it was better becoming a volunteer at Kentland made me a better firefighter. And I was a lieutenant when I joined Kentland. I transferred from Beltsville to Kentland. That made me a better fireman on the career side, just because of the volume of calls and the caliber of guys that I was running calls with. But all the assignments that I had, like, being a kid in the candy store at Silver Spring, in the high rise district, and, we're running high rise fires and, thinking that, oh, this is just a normal part of the day. And when I tell people, yeah, we run 4 or 5 high rise fires a year, they're like, what? That's unheard of. And I was like,
Right.
well, that's just how it is. That's what I thought. Um, and then even at Germantown, learning rural water supply stuff. I mean, who'd have thought, somebody that had a hydrant every 300 feet and learn how to draft. And then same thing in Glenmont. Basically it was just two career guys at night, herding the young volunteers that were there, and kind of having to learn how to kind of keep everybody in line. So every spot that I was in was a great spot. I think between my first spot at Silver Spring and being at Station 23, which was Twinbrook Station as a captain before I got promoted to battalion chief. Great group of guys on the B shift over at Station 23. My driver was a longtime volunteer friend of mine. We volunteered together in Burtonsville. We still talk to each other today. Matter of fact, he just called me a couple days ago. He's been retired, but and then just and once I left there and became the battalion chief between the two battalions, and then eventually being at the 1st Battalion, watching those guys work as a battalion chief, and I don't know if people can understand what I'm saying, but to be able to pull up on the scene of a fire, put the car in park, not have to say anything on the radio because those guys are already doing their jobs.
Yeah.
I can get my tactical worksheet together, and then I can call on the radio, "Hey man, give me an L can." And I know they're where they need to be. So it was a lot of small moves on the radio. And those guys made me look fantastic. I mean, what more can you ask for? Even if I was sweating bullets about what those guys were doing, they're feeding me great information. They're making me look great. And the expectations that I had of those guys, they exceeded and then some. So watching those guys go to work, even though, yes, I would have loved to have been in that fire they were in, but watching them work, it was like watching, a Super Bowl football team, or a Stanley Cup hockey team. Is just so choreographed, so perfect. Even mistakes that were made, they recovered right away and kept moving forward. It was a great experience.
Well, it's a good system, right? I mean, when you have that type of culture, for a battalion to sit back and watch his people play, I mean, it's a offensive coach, defense coach, right? Coach, the overall team coach, like it's all of it. And when you come off when they come off the field and you have a win, and the companies are working well, and even if they fumbled, there's always going to be a fumble or an interception during a game, but at the end of the day, when it all comes together as the guy at the helm, man, there's nothing prouder. I mean, that's just a very strong part of the job that just rocks. I love that.
That's the good thing about the battalion. In the first battalion, it was one of those, and I tell people the first battalion's either you love it or you hate it. But there's no like, it's okay. You either love it or you hate it. And the guys that love it, when they get promoted and they get out of the first battalion, they work their entire career to come back.
Get back.
And they don't care what station they ended up getting assigned to. They just want to come back to the first battalion. And that's a special place in my heart. Watching those guys go to work, being able to go, mutual aid to Prince George's County, working with those guys along the line, great working relationship with them.
How was your transition? I mean, how was your transition from the front seat to your own buggy? Like, did Montgomery County, or do they have a good transition program that sets you up for that title? I mean, I know so many places across the country, they just hand you the keys and go, here you go, congratulations. And
it wasn't quite that bad. It was they had some battalion training. You take your promotional exam, your assessment center, and there's a little bit of that in there. They teach you, we have what's called command competencies, which you'll have a scenario that'll play out and you have to command that. You have to hit certain parameters of that, or it's a failure. And if you fail, then you have to come back and retest. So we do that once a year, but I got like about 5 days of training as for my battalion. They call it a bump up class. So I was still a captain, even though I was on the list. So they can't teach you everything. A lot of it, you do a 24-hour ride along. I did a 24-hour ride along with one of my mentors who was my captain when I was at Germantown. So we did 24 hours and didn't run one call. But we did a lot of talking and a lot of scenarios and things like that. And then when I got promoted to battalion chief, it was one of those, okay, you're going to be on the 1-4 relief. You're going to work Tuesday, Friday. So it's kind of like you're working without a net now. And my first year as a battalion chief, and this is no lie, I had 21 working fires.
Bingo.
And not food on the stove. I'm talking like real working fires, a couple of multi-alarm fires, couple of fatalities. But those guys going to work, in the 1st and in the 4th battalion, they truly want to be there. So it's a pride thing for them not to not do their job or to let the boss down. They're going to do everything they can to get that win. So it made me feel comfortable. Plus we had the 2nd battalion chief that was responding with us, some senior guy that could get in there and kind of guide you as you were moving along. So I was lucky. I got my feet wet in the first year pretty quick.
Well, mentorship's important to you because I know you're a leadership guy and you talk about leadership through many different programs, podcasts. I mean, I think you do more podcasts than I do. Really, Please Suck Less, Side Alpha Leadership, Politics and Tactics on the Fire Engineering Radio platform. You're a busy guy, but I know leadership is important to you. And so then that tells me that mentorship is important as well.
Yeah, it's important. And, as I get a little older, I look at it as like, all right, well, if I'm leaving, who's going to take my spot? And is that person ready to take my spot? The fire service still has this, I got mine and I'm going to put my arms around it, not let anybody else have it. And it's got to get to, I got mine. And now I'm going to show you how I got mine, because when I leave, I want you to be able to do what I do, but better. And that's not a reflection. I want you to be better than me just like your kids, you always want your kids to be better than you.
Of course.
When they grow up, you want the firefighters that are promoting up to lieutenant, captain, battalion chief, and so forth. You want them to be better than you. So it's our responsibility to put that out there. I was never one of those kind of guys that like, I got mine, shut my door and, not going to tell anybody else how to get it because my ego would get in the way. But what if they're better than I am? Good. I'm glad they are. Maybe I can learn something from them, but, it's important in the fire service because we don't have, like we talked about offline, this coast to coast training to be a leader other than NIMS. It's like the
Yeah.
only thing that we have. So it's important for me to make sure that things that I learned I can get out, things that people tell me I can get on my show and they can put out there, stuff that's good. I tend to interview a lot of people that I know, because I know if they're coming on my platform, they're going to be giving good information, as opposed to somebody I don't know that might just throw out some, like, I'm a YouTube fireman, that's all I've ever seen. Um, I feel like I have a responsibility that whatever I say, it has to be decent, and
Yeah, I agree.
whoever's on my show, it has to be decent.
I agree. I mean, there is a sense of vetting and being sure that the message being put out's important, and that it's valid. It's got to come from a place of understanding. It's got to come from a place of experience, knowledge filled, and so on. There's no doubt, and we have all types in the fire service for sure. But today, what's exciting though is we have opportunity to get these messages out there more than ever before. And in a place where, a lot of people are talking about promoting quicker and not having the street experience, but trying to make up for that in other ways. There are other ways, such as podcasts and even vetting content on YouTube or social media to be valid. You can learn from them. And I think that is it can't fill the void, but it certainly can help shore it up a little bit. Maybe, we need people to do as much as they can to be good about the job and to pursue the job as something that is of a lifelong journey, right? As a student, if you will. I mean, I look at yourself. I mean, you have many, many years in and you're still going super strong, and you're taking on more and more. And I think that with I don't know, with age comes clarity, and you have the ability now with your experience and knowledge to be able to put that out there on different platforms and to pursue. You were joking about it before. Yeah, I just can't stop. I started another podcast. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like, that's because I think you believe in your message, and your message is valid and true. And so, yeah, let's get that on the channels that people are paying attention to, and let's share our knowledge and experience. We have the obligation to do so.
Yeah, I look at it as I've been so lucky that I've got to work with people that are so knowledgeable that, I just absorbed everything that they taught, good and bad. You learn from bad officers, you learn from good officers. But the firefighters that I worked with, the older guys that taught me, that took the time to teach me, I'm so fortunate that I had some good people to teach the things that I'm throwing out there now on the podcast and that I put out on social media. I'm not making it up. It's been out there. Andy Fredericks told me a long, long time ago, when we were when we were at FDIC. I asked him, I said, where do you get all this information for? How do you come up with all this information? He's like, Dave, I didn't write this. He said, this stuff has been out there. I just kind of put it all in one spot and put it on a PowerPoint, and I'm teaching it. And that kind of struck me right there as a young instructor. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I don't have to invent something, but maybe I can take the good of things that I've seen and kind of put it all together and say, hey, this worked for me. This is some good stuff here, and take with it what you can,
Yes.
modify it, or whatever. So, it was kind of like, that was like my watershed moment to, like, I want to become an instructor and I want to get on the national stage, and I work towards that. And again, very lucky that I got to meet a lot of people and hang out with a lot of people that were on that national stage, and I could watch them and the message that they were giving and how they delivered it. And I'm at the point now where if I know something that I think is good, I have an obligation to pass it on.
Yes, you do.
If you don't want to hear it, you know what? You can turn it off. That's fine. But I feel like I have an obligation that if I've learned something, I should pass it on. I don't believe in putting ourselves in silos. I think that I know that we have to continue to teach the new people that are coming in. And one of my biggest gripes is people complain about the new people coming in, saying they're not into the job and they're this and they're that. They don't understand. They don't have a work ethic. And I tell them, I said, they're just different. They're not you. They're not me. They're into the job in their own way. These, I don't want to call them kids, because some of them, fairly adults, they do not know what it's like not to have the information at their fingertips instantly. So they can find stuff out right away. So take those new people and meet them on their plane. I'm not saying that you have to be, looking at TikTok 24 hours a day, but you should be able to engage them in what they're looking at, and just ask them, what videos you looking at? What YouTube stuff are you looking at? And hopefully it's fire stuff, and then look at it with them. Hey, let's put that up on the TV. We can stream that to the TV in the kitchen. Let's take a look at what you're looking at. Let's dissect it. Let's look at it. Meet them on their plane. That's how you're going to be teaching the next generation.
Well,
And
it
you need
takes
to be,
work, Chief.
yeah.
It's easier to point fingers and vilify and blame instead of getting in the trenches with them and learning what they know. I mean, I remember when the cell phone was the problem, and then now you look at any age group in the firehouse, and they're all on it. And in fact, the older guys might be even on it even more because they're dealing with their third wife and their second, third jobs and everything else. And so it's easier to blame. It's easier to point fingers. I love the guys that will get in the trenches with this newer generation and say, like, what are you looking at? What are you learning? Where are you learning it from? I'd love to see it. Explain, where can I get that information? Can I find it somewhere? Can you show me? Like, that's how you get the conversation going. That's how you show them respect and worth. That's where they know they can fit in, because if you're willing to give them a second to understand where they're coming from, we then level the playing field a little bit. And I think it takes both sides. And this is that bridging the gap program that I do. I do this. I speak specifically to all these things. And this is where we need to do that. And it takes work on both sides. Not one generation is right. And David, I'm very happy with what you said about having to learn and to take what they're doing and put it into your everyday and make it a part of the lesson plan, make it a part of who they are and the identity of the company. That's important. It's very important.
It's funny because my daughter does TikTok. I'm not a TikTok fan.
Right.
Ultimately, I ended up downloading TikTok because it's easier to make videos on TikTok and then bring them over to Instagram. But I'm the old dog, and I'm learning new stuff, and I find it interesting that I can actually connect with some of the younger people that are looking at things like that. But like, again, it goes back to, I owe it to the fire service. The fire service has given me so much. I owe it to give back, and that's kind of where we are now. With our with Capital Fire Training, we're actually sponsoring. We throw out tuition assistance for classes and training things that are coming up. We'll throw money out there if people want to come to these training classes. We did the same thing at my volunteer house. Say we'll pay for 3 firefighters to go to a conference that's coming up in Frederick, the Key City Fire Conference. We'll pay, for some young guys and gals to go learn from some really good instructors. Same thing with Capital Fire. We'll throw a tuition assistance out there, if first come, first serve, because we want people to get out there and
Sure.
learn. You can't learn everything from your phone. You have to get out there and put your hands on stuff and do it. And I think we have an obligation that if we have the ability to help people get the training that they need, times are tough, things are expensive. We'll go out on that limb and get you, what you need, especially if you want to get out there and learn something from good instructors. So we owe it to the next generation coming in. Like,
I
again, I
agree.
was very fortunate with my career.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. And it has everything to do with your foundation of upbringing in the fire service. And I think the exposure at the young age, being a legacy, I mean, all of that, I think, added to where, the buildup of where you are today. For sure. I wanted to ask you, as the time's ticking by here, I wanted to ask you your new position. I mean, you retired out of Montgomery County as a battalion chief, and then you take a position as the assistant chief of volunteer services for Frederick County, Maryland. Another combination department, aggressive department. What is that title? Break that down for me. Give me a little background on what that title is, what the job entails. I'm really interested in that.
Well, the first and foremost, my boss, my first line supervisor, Shane Darwick, he was a retired Montgomery County battalion chief, and he and I actually worked together at our training academy. So Shane and I are good friends. Have known each other for a long time. So being able to get hired in Frederick and him be my boss was, like this
That's
is
cool.
perfect. The fire chief in Frederick, Chief Tom Coe, he he's a longtime volunteer in Carroll County where we both live. So I've known him for quite a while as well. So again, luck would have it that this position would come up. I applied for it and got it. And having that experience as a volunteer, still I'm a volunteer. I know what the volunteers need. I know what they want. Um, it's a little different from place to place, but the core is the same. Our job is to make sure that they get what they need, they get the recognition that they deserve, and their training, they get the training that they need. Um, any issues that pop up, we help them with. We do compliance training. We make sure that gets taken care of every year. Um, just anything that comes across our desk that the volunteers need, we help them with. Now, Frederick County is like, I want to say, the biggest county in the state of Maryland. It's huge. It's the department, the career side, since I've been there, has gone from 360 career to like five something right now. We're getting ready to have back-to-back recruit classes that are going in at the same time here, starting in February or March. So it's growing big time. We work with the volunteers with recruiting and retention. In our office, we have an administrative specialist. We have a volunteer training coordinator that we just hired. Chief Darwick's the deputy chief of volunteer services. Myself, and then we have a recruiter that she just concentrates on recruiting, going out recruiting, retaining volunteers, running them through their classes. We stay busy. It's
It sounds like a tremendous commitment to the volunteer foundation from which all these fire companies started.
and I tell you, they have some phenomenal volunteers in Frederick County. These guys are diehard. Been doing it forever. Second, third, fourth generation. I mean, just the names, the last names of people are just everywhere. Same last names throughout the entire county that are just in different departments. So it's an old organization. I mean, some of the departments, one of the departments is the oldest in America. One, they're in the Civil War. They went to West Virginia. They loaded up train cars and went to West Virginia during the Civil War. So there's a lot of history in Frederick, a lot of volunteer history, and like I said, the people that are there, they're proud, they're aggressive, they're good firefighters, and work hand in hand with the career people. It's another combination system.
Yeah, how important is it for each department to maintain their own personality? Right? I mean, volunteer fire companies, that's what they're rooted in, right? Is who they are, their tradition, where they come from. And then when you enter into a combination system, because inherently the system has to work for the people, and if that requires putting some career stuff in, a lot of the volunteers don't want to lose their
Identity.
identity. Thank you. They
Yeah.
don't want to lose their identity.
No, and the thing that I got to credit a lot of these corporations, these volunteer corporations, is they recognize the need for the career staffing during the
Yeah,
days at least, because it's not the fire department from the 50s.
that's right.
We don't work in the hardware store across the street and the house siren goes off and we run across the street and get the fire apparatus out. People work all over the place, all over the Washington metropolitan area. So it gets a little lean during the day. So they recognize that they need the career people, but they still maintain their identity with the apparatus that they purchase, with the members that they bring in, the representation that they represent themselves at different events throughout the county. They run functions and things like that. So their identity, it's important to maintain their identity. A lot of people will look at it as you'll start to see the fire apparatus go from corporation owned fire apparatus to maybe a county owned fire engine. Let's be honest, a new fire engine's pushing $1 million,
Yeah.
and that's ridiculous, for apparatus. So you may see a county fire engine being in that station. It doesn't mean that those volunteers have lost who they are. On the contrary, they understand that
Right.
the county's going to give me a fire engine so I can continue to get out the door and serve the public. That's what it comes down to, is that we're there to make sure that the public in each first due area is safe,
Yeah.
and the volunteers represent themselves very well.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think I'm glad you made that point, and I appreciate that, because I think that that's an important part of the conversation, because I'm sure Frederick went through their growing pains. I'm sure Montgomery County went through their growing pains, PG County, all those mid-Atlantic, counties that I know are very successful combination systems today. I'm sure they were rooted in growing pains over the years, especially in the early days.
Well, the cool thing about it is that whatever one department or county is going through, they can just pick up the phone and call the other county and say, "Hey,
Yes.
you guys went through this. How did you conquer that?" And again, you're taking, what I learned in the fire service and passing it on to the firefighters to what we learn as a county, passing it on to other counties. We had Santa Fe, New Mexico County come to Frederick because they're getting ready to move into this combination system, hiring career people. And they wanted to pick our brain of how does it work here in Frederick County. And we sat down and we talked with them, told them, yeah, you're going to have some growing pains. I said, but the biggest thing, you need to get the heads of the fire, the volunteer system, or if you have a president of the association and the president of the fire union, the career union, and they need to work together. That's the biggest thing right there is you all are there for the same thing.
Right.
One's getting a paycheck, the other one's not. But at the end of the day, you're both responding to go put fires out, put people in the back of ambulances and whatnot. There is strength in numbers. Montgomery figured this out. It took a long time, but the union and the volunteer association of Montgomery County, they collaborate on a lot of things, and there is strength in numbers, and they can get a lot of stuff pushed through the political world when they're a unified front. The more people that start to recognize that and recognize that you guys have shared interests, just because these guys are getting a paycheck and these guys aren't, it doesn't make you any different. The job is still the same. And when we're crawling down a hallway and with smoke and I can't see who's next to me, I don't know if you're male, female, black, white, career volunteer. You're just
Doesn't
another
matter.
firefighter going down the hallway with
Yep.
me. So we need to these companies, these combination systems, they need to start working together, career and volunteer, and you'll be surprised what you can accomplish, what you can get, and the political movement that you will have. Because most career people don't live in the county that they work in. All the volunteers do. You work as a career person in the county that you're getting paid for. You start to unify a front, you're going to get a lot of things accomplished.
I love that. That was really good. Really good. So take me from there. So it's got to be a wild ride. Having a lot of fun, I'm sure. Still enjoying going into work every single day, I'm
I
sure.
do. Now it's every day. It's not shift work
Yeah,
anymore. It's
right.
day work.
Not Tuesday, Fridays anymore. Yeah.
Nope.
But with that though too, you're staying busy on the outside. So talk to me a little bit about some of your endeavors too. I mean, I know you're involved with fire engineering. You teach at FDIC, obviously. I just saw your. I think I just saw it pop up the other day that you're going to be lecturing again at FDIC this year. And I know you work with RJ and part of the Capital. The whatchamacallit,
Capital Fire Training.
Capital Fire Training. Sorry.
That's all good.
And so on. So, it's just you're staying busy, right? You're staying busy outside of the career. What does that look like for you? I mean, what's pushing you to stay so busy? Just that give back, that obligation to give back?
There's that. I think I still have a lot of hyperactivity in me, left over from as a kid. I played, we played hockey with the fire department league, softball, things like that. So, as you grow older, your mind wants to do it, but your body says, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah,
So
right.
you really can't do that. But you know, staying busy with the volunteers, with the career, with the family as well. My wife's a nurse, so she works shift work. My kids are old enough now that they can stay on their own. My daughter's in college now, and they still ask us questions, which is good. Ask us for our advice, which is
I
good.
love it.
We
Yeah,
appreciate
of
that.
course.
We go camping. We got a camper. We go camping in the summer and fall and spring, summer, and fall. Um, so we just stay busy. Got to go to the beach once a year. That's my wife's happy place. We take her to the beach and we stay out there for a week in Delaware. Um, but yeah, I just feel like I can't sit. I can never sit. I always want to be doing something.
Yeah.
Um, and my phone, you got the notes program on your phone. I'm constantly going down the road, to hey Siri, and then saying something, and she's trying to record me now.
Yeah.
And just record something on there because I got an idea or something like that. That's where the podcast came from. That's
What I
where the
do.
Please Suck Less podcast came from. And you know ideas for the politics and tactics. And then, hey, we want to make sure we go camping. We want to invite these friends, so it's
Always on the
inside of
go.
every guy's head. It's spinning a
Yeah.
thousand miles an hour, but on the outside, we're like, I'm good.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
do you like to? I mean, you like to focus on leadership. I believe that's your forte, right? I mean, other than the hands-on, obviously, engine, truck, written rescue work, things like that. But the leadership, that mindset, that leadership, that foundation. I mean, that's important to you.
It is. I think, like I said, everything I look back, I was never in the military, but I talked to a lot of guys that have been either non-commissioned officers or gone through, come out as a first lieutenant, and they move through. And I ask them about the training that they have, whether they were in the Army, the Marines, the Navy. They all have their schools, and they're all taught the same way. So when they're leading their people, they're all leading the same way. So when you leave one platoon in, Washington State and you go to, Maryland, if you're at Fort Meade, well, what you learned out on the West Coast is the same thing you learned on the East Coast. Um, so I think it's important for me to, what did I learn? What have I learned in the fire service in the Mid-Atlantic area? What have I learned from my friends that are in the Northeast? What have I learned from my friends in the South, and so forth? And where do we find these common bonds that we can talk about leadership? And then you go out and you just talk to the firefighters. You sit down at the kitchen table and say, "Hey guys, let's have a BS session. Let's talk about, what do you think a leader? What does a leader look like to you?"
Yeah.
And let them tell you. And what I found is that just talking to different um, people in different firehouses up and down the coast, it's all the same. They want the same thing. They want fairness. They want consistency. They want knowledge of the job. They want them to let them do their job without micromanaging. They want them to have learning experience as opposed to, I just got in trouble because I made a bad decision. They want real hot washes. Tell me what I did wrong and how can I improve? All of that stuff is the same coast to coast, north and south. So that's the stuff that I want to put out there to tell people, hey, in order to be a good leader, you have to have these characteristics. You have to learn how to gain respect. How do you gain respect? You have to be a good human being. You got to be humble. I have it written on my wall, accountability, courage, integrity, and humility. Those are the pillars of being a good leader. Once you start truly being that, people will see you as a genuine leader and they're going to follow you. But as a leader, you also have to be a good follower. You can't always be the one that's doing the drills. Have that new firefighter saying, "Hey, you just got out of recruit school. You did some stuff on 3-to-1s on rope work. Why don't you set one up and show us how it works?" And now you're empowering that guy
Yes.
to give a drill that you trust him. And they're going to remember that.
Yeah, for sure. I just find it really interesting. Leadership has become such a hot button topic. When you look at like all the books that are out and New York Times best-selling list and the front tables at Barnes and Noble, so many are leadership stories, leadership books, self-help, things like that. And I often think about it and I go, man, I don't remember that being the topic it was, yesterday as it is today. And it just seems like people are seeking more. Like we're in a place today where we're willing to ask for help. We're willing to look for and seek answers to questions we have. Where I feel years ago we might not have done so much of that, which I think is good on a lot of fronts. Maybe a little detrimental. I don't know. I think sometimes figuring it out for yourself, finding your way, sometimes can certainly help. But also having the tools available to you, people like yourself. I even hit on some leadership stuff in my program. I don't claim to be any type of leadership authority, but there's certain pillars of life. Be a good person. I agree with you, David. I talk about that all the time. Just be a good person, and I can get you very far in life. But it's interesting. Leadership is a very hot button topic today, more so than I think it's ever been.
There's a lot of books out there, and I'm very particular with what I read and what I listen to. I do a lot of audible books because I'm in the car a lot, especially when I was a battalion chief, but very picky with what I listen to. I really haven't read any fire department leadership books, believe it or not, because I think a lot of it's subjective, is dependent upon where you are, what your experiences are. I mean, if you are an FDNY guy, what you're doing up there is a little bit different than what we're doing down here in the Mid-Atlantic. Frank Ritchie and I wrote an article on just being incident commanders. They love commanding outside of the vehicle, where in the Mid-Atlantic, dude, we're in the car with the windows rolled up and the heater on when it's cold or the air conditioner on when it's hot. But that's how it's a little different.
Right.
but I've read a lot of what I look for in a leadership book is I want to read a book about somebody who's been there. So if I'm reading a fire service book, I want to read a book about somebody who has been in a high rise fire, who has been on the nozzle or pulled people out of buildings. Same thing with military leadership. I want to read about guys that have been to war. You can't just talk about war if you've never been to war. Um, those guys are bringing that stuff from the front lines. So that's kind of the things that I'm looking at when it comes to leadership reading wise. I want to read it by people that have been there and done that, maybe even
I'm
gotten the t-shirt.
I'm smirking because I think you just answered my question. You gave me the answer I was looking for. That's probably why it's become such a hot button topic, is because the experience in leadership isn't there or compared to what it used to be. I mean, and the people that have been there and done that, that list is starting to filter out a little bit, and so, we're seeking external sources to help us guide ourselves. We don't have those guys in every firehouse anymore. We don't have those guys in every command staff anymore that have been there and done that. And I think that might, David, thank you. That was good, man. I appreciate that.
Well, I think what you're finding, and I agree with you 100%. Fires are down, not like they were back when America was burning. Those guys aren't around anymore. But if you have those old guys that come to the firehouse that drink coffee, I urge you to sit down with them and have them tell you stories. There is so much knowledge you can gain. But looking at it from the military aspect, dude, we just had 20 years of war.
Yes.
And those guys bought a lot of stuff back from the lines that
Yes.
we can put in our everyday life. I was fortunate enough that I got to go see. I was invited to go to a symposium that Howard County Police Department was putting on. And the lady that invited me, she says, "Hey, if you want to come, I got an extra seat. There's a group called Echelon Front that's going to be teaching. You ever heard of them?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of them." And I said, "Well, who's speaking?" And she said, "I don't know." I said, "I'll send you the receipts of the person that's coming." So it was Jason Gardner,
Yeah.
and so he's worked a long time with Echelon Front. And when it was all the things that he was talking about in the military, I'm like, dude, we do that every day with Incident Command. The things that you're talking about. And we struck up a conversation after the symposium was over, and we talked and picked his brain. And I gave my card. I said, "I'd love to have you on my show." And he actually came on my show a couple of times.
Nice.
Great insight on being frontline military. Obviously the training that you went through as a Navy SEAL and then frontline training. So we've had 20 years of war. So we've got good books that are out there of people that have gone through and lessons that they've learned along the way. We're losing that in the fire service. And again, these older guys that are out there, FDIC, I'm not trying to toot the horn of FDIC, but these are guys that you read their books, the John Normans and all that. They're out there, the Billy Dunns. You can talk to these guys. They're just like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" And you can talk to them and listen to their stories, because those are the guys that have been there and done that. And I think it's important that we hear what they have to say and then learn from their experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree anymore with you. Final thoughts, last words. We've been going for a while. I don't want to keep you all night, but what did we miss? We miss anything that's important to you?
I don't think so. People that know me know that they know when I'm in my office because they hear my music, so they know I'm in the office.
So let's do a Megadeth T-shirt on right now. We talked about it before we hit record. You were telling me how you were quite the metalhead. You were in a band. I love all of that because I can relate. I mean, my 17-year-old daughter, I was telling you before, Paige, absolute metalhead. And she loves everything across the board, which was really cool. But she dove hard on like 70s, 80s, 90s, which is super cool because that's right in my wheelhouse. And so we have the same music styles. We love the same stuff. This summer we did Metallica, we did Def Leppard, Motley Crue. We did God, I can't. There was a bunch more. It was a banner summer of concerts, and there's nothing better than taking your kid with you. Your daughter. I took my daughter. She's so awesome, and we rocked, and it was so much fun, man.
It's funny, watching my kids go from Kids Bop and Disney.
Yeah.
Now they're listening to Tesla and Skid Row.
Right?
And it's still a big fanboy. I still follow all those guys. I sent a message to Sebastian Bach. He's got a brand new song that just came out, and I listened to it, and I'm like, bro, I said, that's like back in the 80s, man. That's awesome. And he sent back, he liked my tweet. I'm like, holy shit, he liked
Right, yeah,
he
yeah,
liked
yeah.
what
Like
I
a little
said.
kid. I love
But you know, it's you know, music has always been a part of my life, and you know, it's I love, you know, the music. I love some of the new stuff. Grunge killed it for me. I'm not a big grunge fan, so sorry
Ah,
anybody that's listening to that. I think
mm,
grunge ruined music personally. But that 80s
wow,
that
wow.
80s stuff was starting to get a little tired because it was the same thing over and over again. But what came out of grunge, the stuff that's out there now, you know, Clutch, they've been around for a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah,
You know, Korn's been around for a long time,
sure.
but now they're just coming into their thing. You know, 3 Days Grace, Disturbed. You
Yeah,
know, all that stuff that has splintered off of that grunge, and it's gotten back to that hard edge metal guitars. You know, diehard Van Halen fan, always will be.
sure.
But you know, just the stuff that's out there now. You know, even Metallica's putting out great stuff still. Um, Huge
I
metalhead
agree.
fan, you know. Yeah, front row 3 times watching Guar back in the day. You know,
War.
yeah, man.
I love that.
But
That's very cool. Well, I mean, that must be your disconnect. I mean, you know, not every day is sunshine and rainbows. You know, it's a good career, but there's down days. And you know, we're actually on one of our other programs, the Size Up. We were talking about this morning, and you know, his line is because what you do off the job matters, and he's going after, you know, the other side of the job, which is your downtime and how you recharge, how you can disconnect, how you can find yourself again, ground yourself so you can get back to the firehouse in 3 days. Like, you know, those conversations. And so, you know, I get it. Music is a good way to unplug and shift your focus. It's a good way to check out for a little bit.
absolutely. Yeah, like I said, with family, you know, watching the kids do their thing
Sure.
and they keep us busy. But yeah, you know, being on day work now, you know, I don't we most of the senior staff doesn't work Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So, you know, we make up our hours. But yeah, you know, looking forward after Sunday, you know, hey, I'm going giving back to go to work on Monday, look forward to it. So as long as I'm still looking forward to going to work, I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. But having that downtime and just kind of hanging out with the family, even if we're just sitting around the living room watching TV, it's all good.
I love it. Well, David, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. I truly appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule with everything that you do, including your own podcasts. Thanks for joining me, man. Thanks for taking me up on the offer, and it was great getting to know you a little bit more. So thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been an honor. Like I said, I've been following it for a long time and
Thank you.
it's an honor to be on here and you know, get the word out. That's pretty cool.
Very cool. David Polikoff, the Assistant Chief of Volunteer Services out of Frederick County, Maryland. Thank you for joining me, brother. You can find him at Side Out for Leadership, Varsity Truckee. And the other one, which I love, is Please Suck Less. I love it, man. Good stuff. Keep putting out good stuff into the funnel, making our job better. Keep up the good work, David. Thank you for joining me again. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Good. Stay right there. I'm going to sign off the podcast, and I'll come right back to you, man.
Mhm.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. What a great conversation. A lot to unpack here. So do me a favor. Take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it. Because when we talk about the job, we are making the job better. I'll see you at the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.